watching it? Yeah. Yeah. Nice out. Yeah. All right. We're going to go ahead and get started. I know that we are waiting on at least two more people who are coming, but we'll let them get caught up. I don't want to disrespect our guest time here today. Are you guys watching the Super Bowl? No. Okay. Well, at the first service today, I had to ask who the Phillies or the Eagles were playing. So shows you how much. The Redskins. The Chiefs. Oh my gosh, that was a really awful thing to say. The Chiefs. Okay, I'm so sorry for that. You're not filming yet, are you? that's gotta stay in this room. That was awful. I'm so sorry. Okay, the Chiefs. Good. Yes. So they are playing, and we have mainly Philly fans here, but I know there were a couple of people. Eagles fans. Oh, Carol, you're Redskin. We're just gonna end this conversation. We're gonna end this conversation, and we're gonna say a prayer for all of us, including myself here, and move along. That was embarrassing. All right, let's pray. Almighty God, I thank you for our time here today. We know that there is always work to do for your kingdom, and we just ask and pray and hope that we are doing the right work, what you have called us to do, what is best, what is good, what brings you the most glory. And so we are in this discernment phase right now, and pray that today we have ears to hear what you have in store for us and what we need to know and what we need to hear. And we pray for our guests today as they share, that you give them the words to share, and not knowing, where we are and where we're going, just give them a unique perspective that can help to guide us and answer questions we might have. And Lord, I thank you. I thank you for this day and for our time together, and that you allow us to be a part of all of your work, which is good. It is in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right, we are going to just do a really quick recap here of the simplified accountable structure, not nearly the whole thing, but just to kind of let you know where we are and where we're at in this process of discernment right now. So the simplified accountable structure, again, it is just taking our boards. We're not getting rid of boards. We're taking the administrative boards of the church, and we're going to combine them into one. I'm going to talk as if this is what we are doing as a simplified accountable structure, but we know that we're just in the discernment of this. So we might not actually do this, but this is what would happen. So we would combine the four boards: the finance committee, the administrative board, the trustees, and the SPRC into one board, and it would be called our leadership board. And the leadership board would be made up of about 9 to 13 people. The 9 is really what is recommended, plus the pastor, and it would change kind of the structure of how the board relates to all of the other ministry committees that are out there, such as the nurture, outreach, and witness, and how we would see those all run together as a system. So we gave the analogy of like the bike. The book uses the bike where the leadership board steers the bike, the ministry committees do all the pedaling, to get our mission out there and into the community and into the world. So that is just a very brief overview of the simplified accountable structure and what we're looking at. At our town hall meeting last month, we did that December or November? December. At our town hall meeting we had there's a lot of really good conversation, a lot of good questions, and Those questions led us to you two. It was asked that we could bring somebody in who actually has been through the process and is currently living the process out in your church. And what are the challenges that you have faced? What are the joys you have faced? Would you do something different if you could go back and do it differently? What was the process like for you guys as you went through it? Before I turn it over to them, does anybody have any questions about where we are right now? Perfect. He can pray. No, just kidding. We already did the prayer. I'm so glad, Otis, you weren't here for the beginning conversation we just had. You came at the perfect time. Okay. So we are in the discernment phase, and we are just praying into, is this what God has in store for us? We have Lyndall Hugler, correct? He is a lay member from Faith Fox Chapel, and I'm going to let him tell a little bit more about the size of the church and the mission of the church. One of the reasons I'm intrigued in those pieces particularly is to see how similar your church size and mission and things that you guys do is to ours, so we can kind of think from a similar perspective, like if we're relatable in that way and in our congregation way. And then after Lyndall shares with us, then we will have, it was Pastor Scott Schaefer was the other one. Scott Schaefer was supposed to come but didn't come. So Gallagher, I couldn't get Schaefer out. So Pastor Scott Gallagher, who is the pastor at Garden City, and his lay member was not able to make it today, and Lyndall's pastor was not able to make it today, but it worked out really well because we still get a different clergy perspective than mine and a different lady perspective than what we've heard so far as well. So I am so appreciative of your voices. Thank you for being here. Lyndall, we will actually go ahead and start with you. If you want to talk about your church a little bit and what your experience was with this process as far as you can remember from the discernment, the implementation of it, and now running through it.
Okay, sure. Glad to. Yeah, Pastor Scott could not make it because his wife Shannon is a huge Eagles fan. Eagles. So yeah, they were committed. You've probably heard of Fox Chapel. It's actually named after our church, even though we're a small church. It was founded in the late 1800s by a man named Fox, and they built a little chapel on his farm, and it was called Fox Chapel. And then the road that went by the church was Fox Chapel Road, and then Fox Chapel Borough. But we are a small church. What we like to say is that although we're a small church, we do a lot of big things. We probably have, I'm not entirely sure what our membership rules are, but we probably have about 100 to 150 members, and typically 50 or 60 on Sunday worship. Is it not? Maybe I need to hold it up a little higher. Yeah. So that's about what our attendance is, and we say that we are one church in two locations. We have our main church in Fox Chapel, but we also have our Roots of Faith Ministry Center in Sharpsburg that also has a regular Methodist worship as well. One of the struggles that we were having about 5 years ago, and I don't know what your situation is, but we were having trouble because of our size, getting commitments to serve on all the various committees that are required by the Book of Discipline. So that was a problem. We also had just the general frustration with a process that sent things through a stewardship and finance committee, and they would meet, and then you'd have yet another meeting with mostly the same people involved on the administrative council at the time, having to deal with those matters. And also different folks not knowing what was going on with trustees or other administrative committees. I see you have this. It's a little different than what we had. We had the first edition, not the expanded third edition. So I don't know what has changed in that other than maybe a lot of experience. But we followed that. We spent several months in a discernment process. We worked with our district superintendent at the time, Dawn Hand, who had experience as well because she came to Pittsburgh from Foundry United Methodist Church in D.C. And of course, that's a very different church. That's a much larger church. But they actually did this. They actually went to a simplified structure as well, which worked for them. But from her experience in her leadership, we were able to go through the steps, do a covenant. So that's sort of the background. I would just at this point, I'm going to hand out a few. I have about a dozen of these. Yeah, if you would, that'd be great. You could just spread those out to people, just so you can see how our structure evolved. I don't have enough for everyone. I didn't have any sense that how many people would be at this meeting, so please share. But I believe that begins with the historical structure, which is more like the Book of Discipline structure, and then we basically adopted a model pretty similar to what KCO 10 recommended, and then we made one tweak after that. More recently, we started a connectional table as a separate committee because we were finding that notwithstanding the best intentions of the Mission Possible, it was very difficult to just be able to coordinate a lot of the ministry activities that we were doing. So we formed that committee to take care of basically for people who were involved in worship, planning, fellowship activities, and the typical areas of nurture, outreach, and witness. So that sort of collected that, and we probably took the name from what the conference does as well. So that's our structure. Just so you understand also, I was involved in the discernment process, and I was the first elected chair of our council, and I did that for 4 years. I just came off of being the chair for 4 years. Personally, it was quite a challenge to have to fulfill the responsibilities of all the roles that get assigned to the board chair, because you're not just the board chair anymore. You're also the chair of finance, and you're the president, chair of trustees, chair of the SPRC committee. So it was sort of it wasn't hard from a work standpoint. I didn't feel like all the roles themselves being in one person mattered, but it definitely makes you think, wait a second, I'm like the responsible person for a lot. So that was quite a bit. But I don't know how to tweak that. One concern I have with our structure is that from my perspective, I kind of think that it would be beneficial to have a separate SPRC and not have those functions included. That was the one area of tension that I felt personally, because by holding all of those roles, you have to have a very close relationship with the pastor, and it worked well, but it could be challenging where we had an associate pastors, and if there was ever a conflict among pastors, and it just added a layer of difficulty to it. But so that's one thing that, from my perspective, could bear some thought and attention. One of the things, I don't want to take up too much time on this, but before you have questions, but one of the big concerns people had when we started this was all the things we were doing. By going to the simplified structure, will things get left out? Will things be missed? And there's a lot of fear about that, but we did. We had about a 20-page document just listing all the things we did and trying to fit them into, well, who's going to do what. By and large, we didn't have any issues. We did not have any issues with that going forward. Maybe there were some things that sort of died on the kind of withered and faded away, but that was maybe more because individuals didn't want to take ownership of them. And so there was really no need for those things anymore. But as far as anything falling through the cracks, no, I don't think we had that problem at all. A challenge is living into the rhythm of this simplified model. One concern, I guess there's a concern also that this may be your situation, but with the smaller group, how do you get information about what's going on out to people? How is there as much buy-in, if you will, on what the church is doing? That's a tough one because I don't have a real sense that people felt like they were being excluded from the process. We did try to have quarterly town halls, so just as a matter of information for people about what was happening, and quite frankly, the feedback was minimal. So either people just were dissatisfied and didn't ask questions, or people were happy and pleased and thought it was a good thing. So I don't have a real sense about that, but I know that's a concern as well that we had to work through. Is will people feel connected enough by not being involved in a committee? Well, you sort of address that by having, as to the extent possible, work area teams, task forces that people can volunteer. So it's very important that you try to make sure that people do maintain connections. So we had a year's experience with this, and then we had the pandemic. So anything that happened after that, I don't even know to what extent they apply anyway. But those were questions that we had to deal with. And with that, I think I'll stop and give it back to Hannah, either for questions or for Pastor Scott.
I'm going to ask you a couple questions while you're up here. Part of the connectional table, what did you say that all includes?
Well, it's basically the ministry activities, education, discipleship activities. It includes worship planning, special events. So like, for example, this weekend we had our Songs of Social Justice event yesterday and today, and that was the connectional table that basically did the organizing for that.
Do you guys operate under the NOW model, the Nurture, Outreach, Witness?
Not as I wouldn't say it's a model. It's just that those areas are all within it.
Okay.
It's. I'm actually brand new to the connectional table since I just rotated off the leadership board.
Okay.
Now I'm new in the connectional table, but so I'm not fully familiar with the rhythms there yet. But yeah, it's. We don't, as far as I can tell yet, have like designated persons or for like Nurture, Outreach, Mission.
Right, it's not structured as formal as
it's very
that.
informal.
Yeah.
Right.
What about the work that the trustees do, the physical work of the building, not the the legal responsibility of trustees, but the physical work? Do you have a separate work team?
We do. We have one of our. It's not really clear from the chart I handed out, but on our leadership board we have a person who's designated as property coordinator, which is sort of equivalent to the trustees chair or like if you had a building committee, the building committee chair. So he's responsible for sort of overseeing building and coordinating a work team that does that. But there's only one there's only one person on the board for that. He reports on, for budgeting, what do we need to include in the budget, making recommendations. But by and large, he will then have his own team that handles building matters.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does anyone have questions? Go. Hold on. I'm going to bring the mic to you so the people on the camera can hear.
Since you're already talking about building and maintenance,
Yes.
does that building and maintenance team, that sub-team, do they meet monthly?
No, they meet as required, but they do a lot by email. They're not really making decisions. The decisions they make tend to be at the budget stage, but by and large, it's just that team is more interested in actually getting things done, and it's more of a organizational. Hey, we have work days. We have a list of projects. Each year in our cycle, we include in the budget maybe 2, 3, 4 projects of a larger expenditure nature. So they'll plan those out. Those tend not to be requiring regular meetings, but maybe a couple times a year reports. There will be more time dedicated to those matters at the board meeting, the overall board meeting.
And does that team have a rotation on how long they spend on that team? And do they roll off after a certain number of years? Or
the person who's on the board gets elected to a 3-year term. But as far as the remainder, it's just a volunteer basis, basically. You're on the team. It's not something that is a charge conference action. So people come, people go, people come on, people come off. There's no formal structure to it that way.
Okay, I'm going to ask one more. Sorry, because I've spent a lot of time on trustees, so I just want to understand how this is going to work. Right. What if there's something not planned, a project not planned, but a crisis, a flood, let's just say? Not that would ever happen.
Why would that happen? Yeah. Well, in that case, you're actually dealing with a church trustees, which is the board, probably needing to act quickly. Typically, if something comes, we did have sort of, maybe it's a unique feature for our church, but we have I mentioned our Roots of Faith Ministry Center in Sharpsburg, and they had a serious flood in Sharpsburg, but we have our outreach director there who just has a lot of authority, was able to spring into action and use our location to bring in flood buckets. People were using it as a place to drop off items. So it's a matter of trying to just get people activated, but not really having to deal with it from a planning committee standpoint. So yeah, what would happen if we had a major catastrophe that we had to deal with? That's a good question. Wish I had a better answer for you than that, but.
And maybe Scott will have something to speak to that too, how his church works. Others? Questions for Lindahl?
Yeah.
Hold on, Jim. I'm going to bring the microphone to you.
How many members are there on the leadership board? Is there a specific number that's selected, and who makes that decision?
Right. It's. I believe the number is 13. I forgot to bring our church
30?
conference. 13. 13.
13.
13.
Oh. Okay.
And yeah, it's elected by charge conference. We try to make sure that, we do follow all the regular requirements, but we have a couple things where, because we have 2 locations, we make sure we have representation from both locations. We also have a youth representative. And as you know, a youth representative cannot be on the trustees. So that's an extra position that we have to have above. I believe that there's a requirement of 9 trustees, but we have to have 10 because of that. But we've filled in just a couple other positions above that.
The leadership team, they take care of what? Trustees?
Trustees, finance, stewardship, administrative council generally.
Administrative council.
Yeah, and also the pastor parish staff relations.
How is that able to be done?
How is that able to be done? Well, yeah.
Oh, okay. Is that better? Okay, sorry.
Yeah, the question is, how are we able to do all of that in one meeting? And as
No, it's not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Because pastor, I was a pastor for 40 years, okay?
Okay.
And the pastor parish committee was a separate committee, and it was not entangled in anything else except to report back to the administrative council situation.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot that goes on at PPR or SPRC, however it's set up. And I'm trying to understand, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And I understand that you got 13 people in the structure here. I've not served this church. I have to deal with the structure here. But we have about 94 different people in the church that are involved in all the different structure that we have.
Mm-hmm.
And this is cutting down. And people they're elected, and they also have the ability to speak to situations and make decisions. The ones that are making the decision, according to this structure, seems to be the charge conference and the leadership board. Is that correct?
Correct.
They're the ones that handle all of it. That's the question I'm raising. I believe in democracy. I have a little bit of trouble in a smaller church, though. I've had 3 churches, and it's hard to get everybody to get the different positions, and I understand that. I'm just raising the question about democracy within the church structure, and just to be on a work team sounds okay, but
Yeah.
people need. My feeling is that all the people need to participate in the process. I'm looking. I'm not a pastor of a church right now, and I'm sitting in the pews Sunday, and I participate, and I'm trying to support the pastor. I'm trying to support wherever I can within the church.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't like the structure of the Roman Catholic Church, where you've got a dictator at the top and several dictators at the next level, and that's how the things are run. And I know in some Catholic churches, the pastor, is virtually dictator. He tells the people what he wants done. I've never had that experience, okay?
Right.
I've had a lot of other experience where we had trouble trying to get things done, no matter what it was, okay? Mm-hmm. And that's my concern about what's going on with they're trying to change the structure. And then people are not participating enough, okay? That's why I was pressing you a little bit.
Sure, okay. I'll take that as mostly a comment. I would just maybe fill in a couple details to it. Well, of course, charge conferences, like, they have their say, right? That's, but then what's that? Right. Yeah, but otherwise, so most of the regular function is administrative council. I think the biggest benefit to what we did was not having a separate stewardship and finance committee where things may tend to go to die, but because people who care about the numbers may say, hey, we don't want to do this or do that, but that gets, and it just gets reported to the administrative council anyway, which is also, and with the trustees, honestly, our trustees didn't really like to meet anyway. They just wanted to get things done. so from my perspective, it really worked well in those areas. But you're right, and one of the flaws that we had was because we weren't it was why we brought in our connectional table to get more people involved in some of those activities. And the other area that I put a question mark on is whether there should be a separate pastor staff parish relations committee, because that, to me, I kind of feel the same way, that almost is its own animal that merits consideration as something different than the model that we actually implemented. So, but those are good comments. So those are definitely the types of issues that people struggle with in doing this.
Pastor Hannah, in the beginning, she mentioned joys. What have been the joys? What have been the gains, ministry-wise, mission-wise? What do you see as the light that comes from the new system?
Well, we adopted the new system, and then the pandemic hit. So, yeah, I think I would say that we have been able to move more quickly on ministry initiatives. So that's been a plus. To a large extent, well, we've had to manage both some good years budget-wise and not so good years budget-wise. So the system has worked well. I would say it's tested itself with good results in both of those areas, both good times and lean times. So those are positives.
Do you feel like there's more energy, more imagination going into the ministry and mission side of what you're doing? Is there a gain on that side as well as on the administrative side?
That's such a tough question, again, because that's such a tough question to answer because of just the way things have changed so much in the last 5 years. So I can't really separate how it would have been differently had we stayed to the old structure. I think we would be dealing with a lot of the same challenges. So I would just say that there's probably, from my perspective, no net one way or the other on that, other than I would say that I am happy that we did go that route at our church. I think it has been good for us. That doesn't mean it's correct for everyone or for other churches, but there are many churches that would benefit from it as well.
Thank you. If you have more questions filtering through, of course, we're going to let Pastor Scott have an opportunity to share his experience, and we can ask kind of both of them some more questions if you have more for Lyndall after Pastor Scott shares his. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me out. Little brief description, I serve the Garden City United Methodist Church, which is in Monroeville. It's a very unique church in that if there is a level of diversity you can imagine, we have it. In that, our leadership model, whenever we changed, adapted to the diversity we have in the church. And I think some of the questions you have were some of the same questions we had whenever we began this journey about 6 years ago. That's when we implemented it. We started the work prior to that. Our church, worship's about 60 in person on a Sunday, about 50 online each week. Used to be all together till the pandemic hit. Then the online option became an easier option for for a lot of folks. So that's about where we're at. The same reason that was already expressed on why to look at another leadership model is we were rotating people from one board to another board to another board. So once your 3-year term on trustees was over, then you started a 3-year term on finance. When that was over, then you had a 3-year term on PPRC and et cetera, et cetera. We also had discovered that even with all those committees, the rotation, there wasn't a lot of buy-in from the overall congregation into the different leadership roles of the church. So we took the one council model and adapted it to fit us, which is one of the things I think is beautiful about this, is you can make it fit your needs for your local church. So what we did was we formed a church council that is made up of subcommittees. Now, those subcommittees function as a group of trustees, minimum of 3, the subcommittee for finance, minimum of 3, the subcommittee on the PPRC, minimum of 3. Then we have members at large that fill out the rest of the committee, plus we have an executive group, which is the chair of the council, the lay leader, and any paid staff that we have. Our treasurer is paid staff, our secretary is paid staff, so those 2 positions are outside of the actual makeup due to their staffing positions, not a 3-year term. Everybody is on the committee, the subcommittees for a 3-year term that rotates out, so all that was familiar. One of the biggest things was something being so unfamiliar, how do you make it work? So we were adapting what had existed already into this plan. By having those 3-year terms, it helped us keep some consistency on understanding what was done last year, what was done a couple years ago, and where we're at in the midst of a process. It also enabled us to do some visioning for the future and have that legacy of that vision throughout the council. Now, if you might be thinking, well, if you have all these subcommittees in a church council, isn't that the same thing you already have with the 4 meetings a month? No. The subcommittees meet as needed, independently from the council, to make recommendations from the council. So, for instance, when you're getting ready for church conference and you have to put together your annual budget, the finance subcommittee will meet a couple more times and then present the budget to the council for final approval. If there's an emergency that comes up, yes, yeah. Right, we call a council just to keep the understanding of the congregation, that things, we haven't, I have a habit of going in, and if there's things built, just scattering them all around and rebuilding them, so we wanted to keep some consistency with language for the church. We have the 9 members minimum, plus the executive team. Right, and we also have members at large, and I'll get to those ones in a minute. Yes. The minimum of 3 on each subcommittee, to facilitate the work that happens. Yes. What's that? That's the. I'll get to that in 1 second. we have the minimum of 3 subcommittees with 3 people on each one. Plus, we have our executive team, which is the council chair, the secretary is staff, the treasurer is staff, the lay leader, and I forgot to mention the lay delegate to annual conference. So each one of those subcommittees only meet if there's a need. So the example, the question was asked about if there's a flood. We had some major water problems underneath of the church. The trustee subcommittee got together, they pulled together the estimates then they presented to the council, and it was decided within 3 days what needed to be done to take care of that emergency. And it would have been quicker. However, it was an $85,000 emergency. So it took a little bit longer to develop that plan, where if it was a hot water heater, it happens within hours, because the subcommittee can call each other. Yes. Right. There's two people that would come to. The council chair can get that call, or each one of our subcommittees has what's called a facilitator. We prefer the name facilitator, because they're facilitating the work that needs to be done rather than directing the work that needs to be done. So you have those 2 people that anybody can reach out to. And that, if there's a PPR matter, they can reach out to the PPR subcommittee facilitator or the church council chair. If there's a finance issue, then the same thing. So each one of that then has 2-person contact point, which covers if people were out of town, if people were unavailable for that emergency, you have a few people that you can reach out to in an emergency need. We then have on our council to have buy-in from the church. because it's a lot of responsibility that goes on. And if you look at all the work of the trustees, all the work of the PPRC, the finance committee, that's a lot of work for 3 people to do. Yeah, so we have members at large on ours. Now, our committee is much larger than what's recommended in the book, and it grew into this because once we started this, people wanted to be able to participate because they weren't locked in to something. Our members at large are 1-year terms, and you can serve in whatever capacity you want to. So when you're at a council meeting, and let's say the PPRC is looking at creating a new job description for a new ministry program that we have at the church. Somebody on the council might say, I have a lot of interest in that, I have a lot of background on that, I know I'm a member at large, and they will automatically participate with that subcommittee in creation of that task. So they're not bound to be on that committee forever or for 3 years. You can bounce around depending on where your skill set is. And I don't know if your experience is like this here. Somebody may have a temporary interest in one thing, then they find themselves on a 3-year term on a committee. And once that one thing's taken care of, then the interest fades away. So this gives the ability to use your gifts and talents wherever they're needed in the moment. Each one of those subcommittees then takes the responsibilities that are listed in the book of discipline that the trustees are supposed to handle, and each person takes on a specific task, or 2 or 3. So for instance, the filing of the corporation papers every year that's supposed to be taken care of, there's one of those trustees on that trustee subcommittee that does that and makes sure that's completed. We have somebody that makes sure that the boilers are cared for each year, that all the scheduled maintenance is done. We have somebody else, so when you see the listing of all the things that the PPR and everything are responsible for, each person signs up to do 1 or 2 of those. And that's the only task that they have to complete that year. So it's a whole lot easier to get people to buy in to being a part of a subcommittee that they know these are the 2 things I have to do this year. I don't have to worry about everything else under the sun. What's nice is whenever we get together, though, the subcommittees, we request that everybody that's done something submit a report each month, a week before the meeting so everybody can read it. We don't read reports or listen to reports at our meetings. They tend to get tangential and take up way too much time. So everybody gets those reports the week before the meeting. Everybody has a chance to read. So our meetings start off with approving the minutes and any questions on any reports. There's no questions, we move on to the old business and the new business. Our longest meeting's an hour and a half. And the most decisions we've made in one meeting are 14 decisions that took place in that night because all the groundwork had been done before we came into the meeting, but not by any one person. If you've ever served as the trustee chair, you've done a whole lot of the work on your own most of the time. Where in this, the facilitator, they might have to give a gentle nudge sometimes. Hey, did you get the fire suppression system checked? Oh, yeah, they're called. Simple thing like that, but don't have to do that or make that call. So when we come together, those reports are done. We discuss any old business. If we have a decision to make, we make it. If there's new business, it comes from anybody that's present in the room. The one meeting, we present what that new business is with the purpose of deciding it the next month. We don't like to table things beyond 1 month. If it's going to take that long, then it's a larger topic that's going to be more of a 3-year or 5-year plan. So it's really sped up the process of getting things done. As is already shared, you don't have to go through 4 meetings to find out if the trustees want to do this, if you can afford it, if the council will approve it. You're doing it all in one night. The finance committee's already presented their report. You know if you have the funding for what the trustees want to do or what the program staff wants to do, and you just move forward with an up-down vote. So it does simplify that. The complexity was in getting used to doing something new. I know the question was asked earlier, how do you do this? I'm a bit of a discipline nerd. So paragraph 247.2 gives you permission to do this as long as you meet the responsibilities of paragraph 243, which all the job descriptions are completed. So by discipline, you can make this transition. And for smaller, it's mostly for churches that don't have extensive parties to draw upon to fill all those different positions in a proper rotation. So the bumps that we had were just getting used to doing it a different way. Oddly enough, there was fear from people that had served. Because if I'm not meeting 3 times a month, we must not be getting anything done. Then when you give the report at the end of the first year and you write down everything you've accomplished in that first year, you say, but we got a whole lot more done this year than we have in past years, with a whole lot less effort and time involved in going out to attend meetings, which is, as stated, often it's the same folks just looking at it from a different perspective. So I think a lot of churches are already on this model, but don't know it because there's still multiple meetings being held. But the same core group of folks are making the decisions across those boards. So that's a summary. We've taken the model and we've adapted to how our church functions. Yeah.
You said you have 3 subcommittees,
Yes.
SPRC, trustee, and finance. Are those all the members of the subcommittees on the council, or
Yes.
are they groups beyond the council?
No, they're all on the council.
So essentially 3 people on the council specialize in trustee, and 3 specialize in finance,
Yes,
and 3 specialize in trustees.
correct. Yeah.
If I got that right.
Yes, that's exactly the way it is. And each one of those 3 people then have their specific assignments to take care of in those tasks. Now, when we have a PPR matter, that is a confidential matter that comes up, or job interviews or anything like that. Those 3 people that are on the PPR subcommittee, plus the executive team, the lay leader, the lay delegate to annual conference, which are already on the traditional PPR, and the church council chair, form the committee that takes care of those confidential matters that can't be held in a general setting. And they're the ones that would meet with the superintendent in the midst of a transition and things like that. So on those occasions that, it's an adaptation to meet those needs that I think Jim expressed earlier about the work of the PPR.
And do you have one person who serves as the chair of all those committees, or do the subcommittees have the person who serves as the chair of finance, and then someone else is serving as the chair of trustees?
Right. We have one chair of the council that operates the meetings and makes sure that everything's being taken care of. Each one of the subcommittees has a facilitator. That's not really a chair. They don't convene meetings. Basically, they're making sure that the rest of the subcommittee is functioning the way it's supposed to. So if somebody was supposed to be in charge of, say, making sure all the light bulbs were working at the church and just do a walkthrough each week, and you go in after 3 weeks and the same light bulb's burned out, the facilitator might say, hey, Frank, what about that light bulb?
Mm-hmm.
Those type of things.
Well, I guess in your church dashboard, you have the same name for the chair of each of those positions?
No.
Okay.
No, the church dashboard, which is interesting because nothing that's in anything referred to as a dashboard works for what you need it to do. So we're creative when we put things in. Whenever you have to input the leadership, we do fill in those blanks of this person is a trustee, this person is this person is that, basically to fill the space in. That's on film now too, isn't it?
Yes. But you did say this model was Book of Discipline
Yes.
permissible. The church dashboard just hasn't caught up with the flexibility of
That's
the
right.
flexibility.
Same thing. Statistic reports. I
permissibility.
used to email John Wilson and say, you don't have enough listings here for the diversity of our church. Where am I supposed to put these folks?
The book that we've read, yep, because you said you used edition 1. The book that we read says that everyone is equal.
Yes.
Everyone is a trustee. Everyone is finance. Everyone is SPRC. And that one person should be the chair of all of those. That's why
Correct, yeah.
I was,
And we do that. Yeah, when we come together as a council, when we discuss a building matter, everybody is a trustee. Whenever we're discussing the finance matter, everybody is part of the finance committee. The subcommittees just make sure that those tasks that need to be completed are done.
okay.
Yeah, so for on the subcommittee of finance, there's one person that makes sure everybody puts in their budget request.
Because in the author of the book talked about, in their first edition, they did say someone should be the SPRC contact, someone should be the trustee contact, et cetera. But she said they went on to find that that actually created division in the board or council or whatever you want to call it. And that's why they now recommend everyone have an equal hand in that they all agree they're on all the committees and someone's not, fighting from an SPRC's perspective or a trustee perspective,
Right.
kind of thing.
And I think that's part of the adaptation. That hasn't been the experience at Garden City, that there's been any sense of competition between the groups. We know that when we're gathered together as a council that we're functioning as one unit. But it's kind of hard, and it's a lot of work to put on the council chair to be the one to make sure all the estimates come in, to make sure that the budget's being prepared, to make sure it was, whenever we looked at it, we knew it was going to be too hard to find somebody that so graciously fulfill that role. So by doing this, our council chair is a contact person and runs the meetings, and just oversees type of things. The easiest way to, maybe not the greatest way to describe it is, if you've ever watched a school board function, the school boards all have subcommittees that make reports, but none of those subcommittees can make a decision independent of the board. Yeah, so it's the same thing with our subcommittees. Nobody can make that final decision outside of the scope of an absolute emergency without the rest of the rest of the council's approval. Yes.
I want to know, what about missions? What about evangelism? What about church and society? What about COSRO? What about the status and role of women within the church? Are any of those positions going to be given to anyone or not? I mean, I have had single stations and I've had charges of 3 or 2. Mm-hmm. And I also had to have a separate, when I had 2 churches, I had to have two separate trustees for the church building, and then I had to have one that covered the whole thing. So it seems to be we have a lot of choices to make. There's no one system except that the one group of 9 or 13 or whichever becomes the council, but everything else is open. Is that the possibilities?
Yeah. What we have done with our programming and ministry type of thing is we have our worship leaders, our ministry leaders of the church, and what they do is they brainstorm on things that we want to do. We present that to the congregation, and then people are able to match their gifts with what they'd like to do in that. And that's outside of...
When you say the congregation, is that a charge conference kind of a thing?
No.
Oh.
No, let's say that our COVID took away our Sunday school program completely. And it hasn't rebounded, but we're looking at ways to do that. So now we have somebody that God has blessed us with, that this is what they've done. They found their way to our church. They have been there for a while and would like to lead that up. So then Deb will then reach out to the congregation and say, hey, these are the ministries that the council said we're going to be opening up to. Who's interested in helping out with this? Then that becomes the group that takes care of those type of things. And we get more participation from the congregation doing that because folks can say, that's where my skill set is. That's where my gift is. That's where God's calling me to. And it may just be a calling to help get it started, but not have to be somebody manning the Sunday school room every week until the Lord calls them home. So we want to make sure that we match those gifts with the individuals coming through.
Do you do a spiritual gift study for everybody that takes a position then in the church?
Yeah, it's a loosely based spiritual gift study, yeah.
Well, there's several of them, obviously.
Right,
but,
yeah.
But you do that, okay,
Yes.
to try to get that to help at that level. I still, I can see it can, if you could get a committee that would do that for 3 years, but you get the gifted people, the people that go on to the board or the council, the leadership council, do they also have to take a gifted thing as well? They're taking that study as well?
Prior to. Yeah, we do that as a congregation.
Before they are elected to
we
those
do,
positions?
Yeah, we do that as a congregation just in general. On a
You don't
regular
do that
basis.
through, do you do it through that everyone has to take that and then you really do, who does the analysis then on that?
The ones that we use are online. The analysis comes back on it.
Oh, someone else is you don't analyze that at the church?
No.
Well, who does your analyzation?
It's an online program.
From where?
I can't remember the website, but everybody answers the questions and it
Oh.
generates what your top 3 gifted spiritual gifts are.
I understand that now, what you're saying. Well, I don't appreciate that very much. Okay.
Yeah. One of the reasons why I don't do it personally is because I'm going to know who filled that out, and I don't want to be predetermined where I think their gifts are. It needs to be completely vacant and anonymous of who's making that analysis. Because I have some folks that I would love to take leadership in particular roles because I think they're gifted there. But if it's not where their gift is, that's not a good fit. Yeah.
How
And I
many-
can appreciate the questions you have because I didn't do this until after 20 years of ministry from the old program, and it was a hard shift for me to be able to make. But then once I got into it, I really hope I don't have to go back to the multiple committee, meeting, 5-6 times a month.
How many, you said you have a lot of members at large. How many members at large? And does it vary from meeting to meeting? Or you said, you said they're on for a year.
Right. Yeah, so
okay.
it varies year to year.
Okay.
Actually, this year we have our most. We actually have 10 members at large.
Okay.
And what's nice about having the members at large is since you don't have to have a specific quorum for the council meeting, folks will come in and give viewpoints that we would have never thought of if we were just the core group. We were planning on putting in a governor's driveway in front of the church so you didn't have to park across the street. You could get dropped off in front of the building, facilitate funerals at the church and things like that. And so that plan was approved. We were sitting there and one of our new members said, you know what the hardest part of me getting into this church is walking up that ramp that you have outside. It's hard to get up it, and I have to walk back down it backwards because it was grandfathered in. It wasn't up to code. Just by that comment, we then made a sidewalk from the governor's driveway over to the church office and eliminated that. We wouldn't have thought about it because the folks that made the decision on the governor's driveway had a specific purpose in mind, and we'd been walking up and down that ramp for years, so we didn't see it. So it was a new voice that entertained that in, and we were able to make that adaptation, and it's been fruitful from that aspect.
What about, I know the book talks a lot about transparency. How do you guys handle communication and transparency of all the stuff you do at your meetings?
The day after our meeting, the secretary has the minutes generated. We send that out to the council just to see if there's any glaring errors, things that were omitted that need to be added in, and then we print those out of there at the back of the church, for the following Sunday, for everybody to pick up and review. So all of our finances are out each week, all of our plans, all the discussions, so that everybody has the opportunity to know what's going on. Any large-scale plans, we notify the congregation by postal service and email.
Other questions?
The transparency. If someone reads what's in the minutes and is not on the council, is not one of the members at large or part of those subcommittees, how do they voice their opinion? How does that get heard if they don't like what they've seen and read.
They're all open meetings. Yeah, so whenever we do a presentation of, like the governor's driveway, just putting it out there that this is what we're planning on doing, these are the reasons why, just some of the discussion. Yeah, that goes out, and then before we make the final decision, because the amount of money it is the next month, anybody's welcome to come to that meeting and voice their thoughts on it. So they can stay for the whole meeting if they want, or if they just want to, speak to that particular issue before the meeting, they're more than welcome to do that. And then, if they choose to go home, they can.
Other questions?
I kind of sat up in my seat when you said you get to the end of the year and you've gotten more done than you imagined or that you had got done in past years. What kind of things are you talking about there? What?
Yeah, we had been talking for years. The first 3 years I was at Garden City about needing to update our job descriptions for our staff. That hadn't been done. We talked about it almost every meeting, every PPR meeting. We need to update these. We also talked about having the annual review of staff. We need to do these reviews. Those were never done. So it was just a repeated thing. We had roof problems. We had boiler problems. A bunch of things around in the building that were talked about but never acted on. So in 1 year, it was the second year that we had put this together. All the job descriptions had been reworked. All the staff had their annual evaluations the same time as the pastor's annual evaluation was done. Our boilers had been replaced, the roof work had been done, and we were looking at what we need to do next for pre-maintenance, rather than taking care of issues that were a problem now. So that's just an example of what happened in that first year, second year. Ministries, that's what it comes from the other group. So that group will often find out, and they listen to what's going on in the church. Sometimes your greatest ideas for new ministries or continuing ministries are talked about on a Sunday morning, but not talked about in a meeting. So they would gravitate and alter those. What we ended up doing is our biggest ministry at the church is our food pantry. The number of people it served. The food pantry went from something that the church was fully funding and being able to serve about 40 people a month to finding out that there was a greater need in the community that we weren't aware of, reaching out into the community. So now our food pantry is operated by our Interfaith Ministerium, but it's led by Garden City, but fully participated by the Interfaith Ministerium. And now they used to be in basically a closet, which is about the size of your back 3 pews, in this section right here, to taking up a space about as big as the sanctuary is now. And listening to the community and listening to people talk, then you found out that, if we can't have the pork in the same refrigerator as the chicken, because people aren't able to eat pork for a number of reasons. Then we ended up with a gluten-free area in the food pantry. We ended up in a sugar-free area in the food pantry, and all these different things that would have never come about. But when we heard people talking, then we were able to talk to the food pantry leaders and say, can you make these adjustments? Those adjustments led to getting grants, so the church doesn't financially support the food pantry at all anymore. It's fully supported by the community and through the grant system, which alleviated a lot of strain so that we had more money to put into our children's ministries, more money to put into our music ministries and things like that weren't available prior to that. That answer? Not saying it's a perfect system whatsoever, but I like buy-in from the church. If everybody feels that they're a part of something in the church, and I don't think there's any greater feeling than, the young lady that said that, her daughter was gluten intolerant. In that conversation going to the food pantry and then finding out that your food pantry was going to have a whole gluten-free section, that you mean something. And then when people in the community found out, we're the only food pantry in the area that has a gluten-free. section, that met a huge need that hadn't existed before. So, but then there are also things that will come back to get you that, why don't we have a thriving youth group anymore? We should have a thriving youth group. Yeah, and we're trying. But, until God sends us that person that's able to take charge of that, those type of things, because then it can turn into, you heard this need and you met it. I've been expressing a need and it hasn't been met yet. So there is the risk of, when you have something fully transparent and a greater participation, you run a greater risk of the reward and the pushback can be equal. Yes. Yeah, 3 years. We just stayed with the standard thing. So when you go on to, you have to choose to be on one of our subcommittees or a member at large. If you're on a subcommittee, it's a 3-year term. Yeah. Then you're off. You can come back on as a member at large for a year if you want, but we won't give you another 3-year term till you've been off of a 3-year term for at least 2. Just to be able to give you a break from and be a part of the congregation rather than leading the congregation. Just a time off, respite.
Any others? Lyndall, did you have any other thoughts that you wanted to add? Thank you, Pastor Scott.
I'm just trying to think if that was pretty good. There are a lot of differences with their approach from ours. Just noting that for us, we don't particularly have sub teams, but we do have similar to what they do. And I may have mentioned this, that we have a person who's, even though he's not the chair of trustees, he's basically leads the building function. A sub team is that we have of our board is we're a 2-pastor church, and we have a pastor support team for each pastor, which is comprised of 2 or 3 members of the board. We have one of our board members is sort of designated as a personnel coordinator. So that person has the responsibility to, if there's a hiring matter, to head up a hiring team for one of our staff positions. I should say that in our church we have 2 pastors. We also have an office manager. We have a preschool with co-preschool directors. We have a separate preschool committee that we have a preschool coordinator who reports to the board, but that's just a report that comes to the board. We also have an outreach director who's based at our Roots of Faith location, and also we have a paid staff person who is Next Gen Ministries for children and youth. And one of the dilemmas over the last 20 years is that we find that more of our ministry is being done by paid staff people instead of from volunteers from within the church. And that's just been a change in how the church operates over the last 20 or 30 years. So unfortunately, we don't have that volunteer base anymore. We're doing a lot more through staff. So as a result, our budget has gone up quite significantly over the years, and that tends to create stresses. So in our cycle, the board does a lot of visioning. Every year we'll have a retreat. Maybe once a quarter we'll set goals that are short-term. What are the 2 or 3 things we want to do? And it's been very efficient at getting things done. Like Pastor Scott mentioned, how you can find ways to take care of matters that otherwise people talk about for 2, 3, 4 years and they don't get done. So we've been very good at being intentional about that. So one of the things that then in our approach is that the budget season is sort of its own beast at the end of the year, and that takes up a lot of time just to come up with a budget that makes sense, and that can get complicated because if you have to make cuts, where do they come from? But it's good because it's all done at the board level. It's not, you're not having those discussions except at the board level at the end as far as what the high-level budget decisions are. Then from that, once the decisions are made going forward, we have our ministry groups that they have authority to decide how they're going to spend that budget. And so it's not micromanaged by the board at all. The board basically adopts the budget. The ministry teams and staff take that information and they just go and run with it. So and we have a lot of flexibility built in as well. So then occasionally we'll have interim. If there's a need that comes up in the spring that's not budgeted, then we also have felt that we're not locked into that budget. We as a board can make that decision anyway, because we adopt the budget anyway. The budget is not adopted at the annual church charge conference. It's adopted by the board.
Thank you. Scott, do you guys do a retreat with your board once a year, or visioning, planning? How do you do?
We do a congregational visioning to set the direction for the church, and then the council adopts what has come out of that. So it's not independent from the rest of the church.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Comments? Concerns? Outrages? Joys?
I do have one thing that I forgot. One of the biggest challenges we had was the first time that I had to tell a gentleman who had been on the trustees for 30 years that he needed to be rotated off for a 2-year break. That was a big challenge. So we found other ways to fulfill that that need that he had in his life. But
Okay.
then at the second year of that break, he was glad to not have to do anything, worry about rock salt, shoveling, any of that work. So.
Any others? Okay, from this point on, we thank you both very much for coming. I hope that you have safe trips back across the city. I know neither one of you really have the simplest of treks back home, especially because 65, doesn't matter where you're going, it's rough. But I would just let you know what our planning committee is doing, our next steps. After this meeting, I'm really hoping to hear some more feedback from you all. You know that our planning committee members, you can give them feedback as well. That is Donna, Janine, Pam, and Jim Canfield, and Mark Benjamin. So please feel free to get a hold of any of us. You have any questions or comments, something you want us to know. But our next steps are to meet together, just kind of rehash this meeting and what we've talked about, and then write down a rough draft of what we kind of see and what we hear our guiding principles should be. Did you guys do your own guiding principles from what the book suggested? Okay. And guiding principles, were they separate from each other or were they the same thing?
To be honest, I think we discussed it, and once it was incorporated into what we were doing, we just lived into that and probably didn't use that terminology anymore.
Okay. What about you, Scott? Okay.
But we do have we do have a covenant that I think they talk about that every year leadership board looks at that and decides whether to continue with that or make any changes.
Okay. Was the covenant different than the guiding principles? Do you I think they were two separate things. Okay, good. So that was what we were going to do, and kind of we also were going to make up what we could see a rough start would be for a graph like this. So what would we look like? How would our structure look? Okay, any questions? Nope. Okay, I am going to close us in prayer, and you guys can go from here and contact us, any of us, phone, email, text, as you would like. Let's pray. Almighty God, thank you so much for our time together. We thank you for Scott and Lyndall, for them sharing with us just their knowledge, their wisdom and experience, and sharing openly about their joys and challenges. Lord, I pray that we have heard and we have retained, and that as we continue to gather together, we may move forward in a way that you have called this congregation uniquely to do. But I am grateful for our connectional system that can help guide us and work together on it. Lord, I do pray for anybody who is celebrating tonight, that it may be done responsibly, and just that all players play to the best of their abilities. Thank you, Lord, for this important work you have called us to. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right, break. And what they say.